Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the biggest freewheeling live streaming poetry podcast on the planet. So glad you could join me at this special time. We're doing it a little early so we don't compete with the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl has a lot of viewers, and we don't want to take the viewers away. So we're going to do the show early. Glad you could join us at this time. And it's a nice opportunity, too. Hopefully people are joining in from Europe and the Middle East and places like that where it's hard to get at the regular time. This is your opportunity to participate in the prompt lines later in the second half of the show live. So I hope we get some people from Ireland, like our main guest is, in the UK and other places like that. SC Flynn is our guest today. We'll be with him in about 8 minutes. Before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. And I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you do to help spread poetry around the interwebs would be much appreciated. And now we're going to go, as we always do, to our news poem of the day, our Poets Respond poem. And our Poets Respond poet is a very familiar face, someone we love around here. I think it is her 17th time in Poets Respond, and Abby E. Murray is here. Hey, Abby, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. And again, you're one of those poets that can capture the political moment in a way that's still poetry, which is just so valuable and important. This is one of those times where we're getting 300 poems a week, but most of them are sort of the kind of political sort of messages that have a purpose and start in the same place they end up and really don't rise to the level of poetry. But your poems always do. You take that, what's going on with the news and find the humanity in it, I guess, which is the whole point of Poet Response. So thanks for doing that. Can you tell us how the poem came to be this week?
Thank you. I think poetry is kind of the only way right now that I am able to make sense sometimes. I don't know if it's something about the practice of just sitting down with my thoughts and being able to just process those thoughts. But this poem in particular, I was thinking about the few people I have been able to run into lately and talk about how none of this is surprising. None of the grief and tragedy that we're seeing, it's no longer surprising us. But we're still processing it. We're not desensitized. We're not turning it off and turning away, but we're no longer surprised by it. And I wanted to write about that, and I got a 2 hour chunk of time to do so. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I keep thinking about with what's all that's going on right now. That old phrase from the Iraq War, that shock and awe. It feels like we're in the middle of a kind of shock and awe situation with so much
mhm.
happening so fast you can't even keep up with it. Like you don't even know what to think about at any moment because there's some new thing coming in 5 seconds later, and so
Yeah,
yeah,
the shock and awe is over. Long live the shock and awe.
yeah, exactly. Well, do you want to read the poem?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. 2 hour delay. It's February, and already I've overspent my budgeted bewilderment for the year. Most of it on deep and constant sorrow. War, deportations, deployments, hatred forged into policy, theft, dead phone lines, and locked doors. I've seen more planes fall from the clouds this winter than snow. So, for less than an inch of scattered flakes across the city, our superintendent delays school for 2 hours. And before I fill them with what I have in excess, lack of amusement, a backlog of worry and work, my daughter runs outside, gloveless, hatless, and all I can think is how lucky she is, at least, not to be named after industry or my assumptions about her purpose on this planet. When I read about the young couple practicing eugenics in preparation for an apocalypse, the mother's ridiculous straw bonnet and father's smug face don't make my jaw drop. My eyes don't widen. Belief is the new disbelief. Grief, not shock, is this year's renewable resource, and baby, the harvest looks plentiful. My daughter returns to show me how she scraped together just enough sidewalk grit and ice to sculpt a snowman the size of a pigeon. She props it up in the weeds we call a yard, and it stays for days, long after the sun revokes what's left of the frost and glitter. It delights us without the burden of surprise, which has never improved anyone's life or built a single beautiful thing.
Yeah, and that's just a profound poem that captures so much of what everyone's feeling right now. That was 2 Hour Delay by Abby E. Murray. And Abby, do you have any advice for people who are trying to write poetic responses to the news and politics and this kind of shock and awe that's going on? Like how do you get to those spaces where you're thinking more deeply and less, with your left brain about poetry? We can come up with those great lines, like there's so many great lines in that poem, and they don't come from forcing things out. They come from letting them be somehow.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I'm going to be teaching a workshop actually on writing the occasional a poem, and it's really, really about letting things really, really be. But I would say that my advice would be to really listen to what people are saying and what people are feeling. I think when I write, I kind of do the opposite of Richard Hugo's Triggering Town. Like I really do pay attention to who's standing behind me, behind my shoulder, and listening to them, and thinking what is it that they're feeling and what are they needing and what do I need? And then I write the poem somewhere between there.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Abby. It is great to have you. Always sharing wonderful poems, and a real pleasure to read them. Depending on no matter what the circumstances. So thanks for being here and sharing
Yeah,
that.
thanks. Thanks.
Yeah. Once again, that was Abby E. Murray. You can find all their work at their website, abbyemurray.com. So check that out. Thanks so much, Abby, for being here, and we'll move on to the featured guest tonight, which is S.C. Flynn. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is S.C. Flynn. Stewart was born in a small town in Australia of Irish origin and now lives in Dublin. His poetry has been published in over 100 journals and magazines around the world. The Colour of Extinction, his first full-length collection, was just published by Renard Press. And you can find all of his work at scflynn.com. Here he is, S.C. Flynn. Hey, Stewart, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me here. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's definitely my pleasure. You were actually in the Irish Poets issue, and one of the more enthusiastic participants too. It's really wonderful to see, how much you did on social media, sharing that issue and things. It's really cool that you have this new book out, which is a beautiful cover, which we just saw. What can you tell us about your debut poetry collection? It's very thematic, and so did you know that you were writing toward these poems? It's interesting to have a debut collection that is this based on, focused on a theme. So did you always know you were writing toward this?
No, the poems actually collected in The Colour of Extinction, which is about nature and climate change, go back over a long period of time. There were various themes that I've written about periodically over that long period of time, as we'll go through when I read some poems from the collection. So it's not the only thing I wrote about, but over time I collected enough to be able to put a collection together that covered this theme in particular.
Yeah. Well, let's hear. I think it's the first poem from the book. First off, Inheritance. Do you want to start with that?
Yes, Inheritance. Under a sky, the color of extinction, you choose your own conclusion. The Earth might have already done so. Somewhere in its whirling mass of DNA and infinite genetic possibilities is the clue to what will replace us. Perhaps an existing creature will evolve, switching on latent capabilities that have lain dormant for millennia. Or the distant descendants of extremophiles currently clustered around hyperthermal vents and suspended from the roofs of caves will develop in unimaginable ways. But then again, maybe once is enough, and the world will embrace equality with no striding master or dictator, and 10,000 years of civilization will shrink to an unrepeated moment.
And so that was Inheritance, the opening poem to S.C. Flynn's book, The Colour of Extinction. Hang on 1 second, I gotta adjust something. Yeah, so you grew up in Australia, Stuart, and I think that really had a lot to do with how your feelings and thoughts about the environment. Can you talk a little bit about growing up in Australia and how that influenced you?
Yeah, it's definitely been a unique sort of experience. I grew up in a small town, as you said in the intro, Tim, and my initial memory that I have about observing nature was when this is very, very Australian. I was sitting when I was 3 or 4 years old, a wheat bin, which contained wheat that was used to feed the chickens. I used to sit in there because I was sort of raised up off the ground when I was very small and observe nature and everything. So I've really sort of been observing and trying to make up stories and everything about nature literally as long as I can remember. And Australia, as probably everyone will know, is a vast country without a lot of people, less than 30 million. And most of the people that are there live in large towns or cities clustered on the coast. About 80% of Australians live in large towns or cities. So it's actually a very urban country in terms of population. But all that business in the middle is enormous and empty of people. So I think the relationship of nature and humans in Australia is fairly unusual in that sense, that most of it, the nature is far, far away from where the people are. And we live a lot in this mythology of the outback Australians, and there are some of those, but like Crocodile Dundee, of course, but there are some of those, but most of them live in towns, and the outback is something you really have to make a big effort and travel maybe even for days to get to. And so there's a sort of a large unknown territory, if you like. Very different from Ireland, where my family comes from, where I live now, where there's a history of humans interacting and affecting the environment that goes back for thousands of years, back to the time of the ancient monuments that are still here. And that's a very, very different situation so for me, Australia, the main characteristic it has is that primordial nature that's been going on for hundreds of millions of years, as if humans weren't there at all. That's pretty unusual in this day and age.
Yeah, and everybody's familiar with all the diversity of wildlife and the animals that only exist in Australia. So what small town? Where were you exactly in Australia, and how often did you get out into the more natural areas?
It's in Western Australia, which is on the edge of what's called the wheat belt, but it's also not that far from the desert and the goldfields area. If you've heard of Kalgoorlie, where it had gold rushes like in California back in the late 19th century. And every time I go back and visit there, it's very noticeable to me the touch of the desert, because it can be 40 degrees Celsius during the day in summer. Like I was there just a year ago visiting my dad. But at night, it gets genuinely cold. And that's, of course, classic desert sort of climate. In fact, I should say while I'm on deserts, there are, I think in Australia, 12 named deserts, which are vast, and 6 of them are found wholly or partially in the state I come from, Western Australia, which is about 6 times the size of France, but most of it, as you can understand, that is a desert. So it's a very desert climate, but where we are is more down towards on the edge of a temperate area with forests and so forth. But you can certainly, as I've just said, you can certainly feel at night with that cold coming in. The desert's not too far away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's keep the poems coming and read the next one you have for us.
Yeah, sure. This one is like the first one, is from the first part of the collection that is on the theme of climate change, and it's called Panic Response. It's a short one, Panic Response. Misled by unseasonal warmth, a migrating bird returned too soon, shivers in the inexorable cold. Each another world to conquer, new islands in the Arctic revealed by the melting ice. Flowers alone in warm, bright fields, waiting for bees that will never arrive.
Yeah. And that was a Panic Response from The Colour of Extinction. And as you can tell from those 2 poems and the topic and the title itself, The Colour of Extinction, the book is about our interactions with nature and the devastating effects humanity have in many different ways. Do you remember, Stuart, the first time that you realized that something was sort of off? That nature had a problem, I guess you could say. For me, I didn't really think about it that much, except for external stories and stuff, until for the first time I flew a plane across the country and realized how much of land is actually used, just looking at the tapestry that sort of never ends of roads and fields and things. It sort of didn't occur to me how much, how pervasive, I guess, staring at in your face, that the impact of humanity is on the earth. Did you have any experience like that that made you realize that it was an issue that you cared about and needed to address?
Yeah, where I come from, as I said, Tim, is a part of a farming area, mostly wheat farming, and a big problem there is salinity and also lack of topsoil due to erosion. And those have been, I couldn't help being aware of those, obviously having friends of mine who are farmers I went to school with and everything, being aware of that, which is largely from the removal of trees, which, as you know, do a very important job in holding the soil together. And so there was I guess it was a big trend. People didn't think about it in those days when they cleared extremely quickly those areas of the trees in order to put crops in. But over time, it's become a big problem. And so as long as I can remember, that's been an issue, salinity and erosion. Because down there, I mean, I think your wheat growing areas in the USA often have very deep soil. And I think in Australia, that's not the case. It's always very marginal. It's just a tiny bit, and so it's easily removed by wind or erosion. So you always, that's part of what I was trying to say before, you always have the feeling, unless you're in the middle of a big city in Australia, that you're sort of a bit of an alien in this land, that nature gets on quite fine without you and doesn't even know you're there in effect. But where humans do have an effect, you can see it's pretty vulnerable, actually, surprisingly fragile, that environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's hear another poem.
Yeah, I'm going to read one from the second part of the book, which is called Feathered Neurons, which is about the interaction of birds with humans. This is a topic that interests me a lot, about, and something that's definitely happening now and will have to happen in the future, how certain creatures will have to, and some will manage to actually live in our world because we sort of force them to. And birds, I think, are a very good example of that, obviously being extremely mobile. And where my wife and I live in Dublin along the river, we're in the middle of a gull colony. So seagulls, they're commonly known, gulls. And they live on the roofs and nest there. and we're surrounded by them. So we've sort of got to know them a lot and observe them. And just like other animals, when you see them every day, you can notice their personalities and characteristics they have. They're not all sort of one mob. And so I've done this poem about the gulls of Dublin, and it's called Dinosaurs on the Roof for the Gulls of Central Dublin. Some refugees have wings and live in our world because we took theirs from them. The ancients learnt much from birds, and so have I these years. Determination and adaptability, fighting for what is important to you, and letting the world hear you state your case. I will forever remember them all. Connor the bold, foster son and familiar, Neve the shrillest and O'Shin the hoarsest, Finbar the clown, who I've known from the egg, Saoirse, wearing her leg ring like a model, Lorcan the explorer who returns each spring. Companions in the struggle of life, sharing the great nest of our city.
Yeah, and that was another poem from The Colour of Extinction. That was Dinosaurs on the Roof by S.C. Flynn. And you mentioned the different sections in this book. There are 4 sections. It's climate change in the first part, on birds, on Australia, and Antarctica. That's sort of the way you divided up the book. What was the purpose of those 4 categories in particular? How did you decide to structure the book the way it was?
Yeah, as I said at the start, I didn't really set out to write the collection on those themes or with any special plan. It just happened over time that those happened to be topics that I kept coming back to and writing about. And as I said, though, living in the middle of a gull colony, that was something that focused on. And then Australia and Antarctica, I was a long-standing interest of mine. So no, there was no sort of specific plan. It sort of came together like that.
Yeah, and so the 4 categories, just sort of as you were looking at your poems, they kind of emerged, and you saw that they were there.
Yes, yeah, I guess so. That's and then when I thought maybe I've got enough for a complete collection on his theme, I sat down and made the sections and chose the section titles from lines of the poem, as you've heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear the next poems, Stuart.
Yeah. Another species that I do not live near, but is vultures, and this one is particularly about vultures in India. You can also apply it in part, I believe, to California with the condors, another sort of famous but endangered species, I believe. But here I had in mind the vultures of India. And as you probably know, there was a relationship of going back centuries between the vultures and farmers in India. The farmers would leave the carcasses of deceased farm animals for the vultures to clean up, and that was their job, of course, to stop diseases spreading. But in recent decades, substances that the farm animals have consumed, given by humans, like diclofenac, that vultures can't process them, and it shuts down their kidneys, and they've died in massive numbers and are close to extinction. So I've done that in this poem entitled Empty Trees. A town, complete in indifference, where noon falls heavy as a concrete slab, and the days are long, bright, and vast, far too large for their meagre content, waiting for the promised arrival of something. There should be vultures on those branches, watching the efforts of the humans to give a semblance of meaning to their lives, but this silence slowly maturing in a world bleached to meaning was their fate. Wings of the past lightly brush your cheek, and for a moment you see them again. Refugees migrating into extinction, heads bowed against the bitter wind of time.
Yeah, and so that was Empty Trees, again from The Colour of Extinction by S.C. Flynn. And as you were writing these poems, how conscious were you of the task at hand? You know, were you just like the poem before with the gulls on the roof? did they happen spontaneously, or was it more like you were doing this reading, looking at different, parts of nature and things that were happening, and then intentionally writing poems about them? Is that the impetus for, the topics that you cover in these poems, or is it, is it something you were doing intentionally?
Yeah, my process, Tim, is that I read quite a lot of nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
Gives me background, and I find it stimulating also for topics. And I simultaneously, parallel with that, keep my notebook of any phrases and ideas. And I often carry topics for years before I find a way. I was wanted to write about the gulls on the roof and how we interact with them for a few years before I found the way of doing it. Now, I started various times, and just straight description didn't seem right. And then eventually I found what I thought was the right tone. So that, for me, it's the gestation period, so to speak, can be very long for poems. And then one day I'll find the idea that I wanted to write about. I've found that perhaps the imagery, and I've also found some of the background reading to fit it, and all the ingredients sort of come together. Mm-hmm. So it can be a lengthy process.
Yeah, and what's the process like of forming the poems into the final version? Because you notice they're mostly sonnet length type poems. They're about that relatively short, maybe 15 to 20 lines. What is it that is it that you come up with a lot more and concise and pare it down into the size that they are, or are you drawn to shorter poems to start with? What is the process like with regard to that?
It's a bit of both, Tim. I personally do like short poems that deliver what they've got to say, and then off. With my sort of thinking is, if the reader likes it, they can read another one. So you don't want to lose your audience by going on longer than necessary. And personally, my own approach to editing always seems to be cutting. I'm trying to aim for concision and concentration of language and imagery. So a sort of relative intensity, I suppose, and that tends to come much more strongly with shorter poems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's already a great question, and this is sort of something I wanted to get at as well, by Rose Renard. She says, do you find that writing about these serious and often devastating topics helps you to feel at peace, or does the writing take you to a painful place that you don't want to spend too long in? And that's just such a important question, as we poets do, because poetry tackles problems. Really, it's a way of thinking creatively and non-linearly, and coming to terms with things and making connections. And so it tends to be problematic topics that we write about, things that disturb us or what we're driven to write about. But then we end up with poems that are sort of disturbing too, And so the question, from Rose is just such an important one is do they bring you peace when you're writing them, or is it painful to write them?
Yeah, I personally am very strongly affected by images of animals suffering. That's always had it really, really upsets me. So, yeah, I don't find personally sort of a happy feeling out of writing poems, but when something has come together with the elements, I find it, in an artistic sense, satisfying. And the compensation for having to confront things that are often painful is that you hope that you've introduced a little bit of beauty into the world that wasn't there before in your writing, and you sort of have the hope that someone else somewhere can share that beauty. And possibly, as I've said with things like the vultures, possibly some people have a bit of awareness of a topic that they weren't so familiar with before. So, yeah, it's a tough one. That I find it, as the way I've said, way poems together, it's a fairly hard work, and more like being a craftsman molding different elements, and it's can be fairly tough work.
Hmm. Yeah, I think about how Edgar Allan Poe was obsessed with the concept of poetry being about bringing beauty into the world. I mean, that was kind of what it is. No matter how dark and dreary things might be, there was a beauty to it that you could give birth to in the creation of a poem. And does make me think about the way that there can be beauty in anything if you look at it a certain way, and even things that are negative and difficult, there can be a beauty there in illuminating that and putting color into that. And so is your focus on trying to bring the beauty, and how do you go about that when it's such a dark topic?
Yeah, if I had to put one thing, personally, I would say try to stress beauty in poetry. And probably when my poems work best, or what would be typical for me, is a combination, I like to think, of beauty, strangeness, and sadness all working together. And I'm a strong believer in the fact that poems and art in general have to keep trying to move on. And so I think it's necessary that we try and confront new subject matters, and what was considered conventionally beautiful may still be today, but there may be other things that we can appreciate as beauty today. And so that's probably my major thing I try to bring out is beauty in poetry. And as you've said, that can mean sometimes confronting some topics that are at the start unpleasant. But I hope to get around that by developing imagery that's compressed and imaginative, and I hope memorable in lines and phrases.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem.
Yeah, I'm moving on now to the third part of the collection, Tim, which is about Australia, uh, as we've said, where I grew up. And the first one I'm going to read is about bushfires, which has also been a very relevant topic in California recently. And I've seen some of your comments on the bushfires as well. In fact, we're quite close to the Rattle office. Remember, we corresponded on that, but you got through that, obviously. In Australia, this is with the climate in general is very hot and very dry. So it's a thing that's always been there for forever, well before humans came along. Although, at least I can speak for the part I come from in Australia, that climate change has made these fires more prolonged, it seems, and more severe.
Mm-hmm.
So that hasn't created them, but it has exacerbated them, if I can say that. This poem, I'm glad to say, though, it does have a bit of a happy or hopeful bit at the end, because in Australia, a number of plants evolved over many thousands of years that they require the extreme heat of a bushfire in order to germinate. So they're actually waiting there for that to happen. So that's what concludes this one. So here I've picked up an image that I've seen many times when I was a kid. You don't go near the bushfire, obviously, unless you're trying to fight it. But afterwards, you get this aftermath. So this is entitled After the Bushfire. The smouldering night has exhausted itself, and sunrise bleeds away the bruises, slipping a red gold mask over the landscape, eyes half shut against the drifting ash. Burnt trees stand in piles of cinders that will soon be cold and dense as omens, syllables of a scattered alphabet asking questions of their ragged shadows. Underneath the forest's puzzled face and the ground's grey bankruptcy lie seeds that have waited years for this, as if to say, let me breathe again, give me back the sky.
Yeah, it's a fascinating poem. After the brush fire, and as you mentioned, I did live in Southern California for a long time, in a wildfire area, and was on the CERT council and things. So knowing all about the topography and ways you could help and what to do in forest fires, mitigation and stuff was something very important. And what you learn when you live there for a long time is how natural fires are to the ecosystem, and especially in the American West is what I know about, in Southern California in particular. But we don't think of the way, as I think we sort of see the fires on TV, and imagine, they're so devastating and awful, and for many reasons, they're bigger than they've ever been. Individual fires they're bigger crown fires than is natural. And to see that devastation, it feels like a natural disaster, but that it's a natural disaster that is part of the ecosystem that certain plants thrive on. And there's certain, pine species that their pine cones only open when there's the intense heat of a fire. And that's because the soil is re-enriched with nitrogen then from all the burned fuel. And then there's more access to the light. So it's a perfect time for certain plants to emerge. And they've evolved over time to do that. And so there's a natural fire regime everywhere we go, everywhere we live. And even in the eastern half of the U.S. where it doesn't burn much, it's still every few hundred years there's a forest fire. It's a natural part of life to have fire and that sense of renewal. But living in, as we do, and I think Australia that you mentioned is a perfect example of that, where all the people live in cities, and we're sort of disconnected from the natural ecosystems completely. And so we see these catastrophes caused by nature, and we think of them in the same way we might think of other devastating catastrophes that serve no purpose. And the fact that the way that it's all part of a natural balance is something that we tend to not to think about. So I think, with writing about nature, it's so important to explore that. And is that something that you're interested in exploring and bringing to light, the ways that the things that we might not know about the natural world, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, I try to read a fair amount of nonfiction. I'm not a scientist or anything, but I like to try and find out things and discover so much. And then, as I said, after they've maybe germinated, so to speak, in my notebooks for some years, I might find a way of making that into poetry. I hope without being dry or academic. So yes, and the more I learn about nature, it's not a new thing to say, but the more I learn about nature, the more amazing it is, the things that are there. I mean, every day on social media, just about, I see like a new species of bird that pops up. Someone says, amazing colors and lifestyle, and you think, never heard of this creature, but there's just so much. And obviously a sad part of thinking about climate change and extinction events now is that, again, not a new thing to say, we're learning so much about nature at the very moment that so much of it is vanishing. And that's a little part, in my small way, of what I hope I'm able to do with some bits, is to preserve some of that beauty and at least observe it while we still have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem, Stuart.
Yeah, this one is a hopeful one. It's not all gloom and doom. This one is a pretty short and simplistic, impressionistic kind of poem of when my wife and I visited the extreme southwest corner of my enormous state of Western Australia, and you can actually see there where two oceans meet, the Southern Ocean and the Indian Ocean. You can see they actually collide and have different tidal patterns, so you can actually stand there and watch it. So that was where we were here, and this is called Hope, and this was at the Lewin Lighthouse in Western Australia. The Indian and Southern Oceans touch, and then follow separate destinies. Humpback whales roll in the water, slapping their fins to send out spray and messages. Seabirds carry nest materials, dropping little pieces on the way as signposts. A magpie lands close by and sings, maybe to my red jumper, maybe to the future.
Yeah, I love that last line there. That was Hope from The Colour of Extinction by S.C. Flynn. And I should say, if anybody has any questions for Stuart, please leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass any along. Also, this is the time where I should say, if you're enjoying this conversation, please do click the like button. There's always many more people watching that have clicked like, and that's the case right now. And if you click like, that really helps us out wherever you're watching this or listening to this later to help spread poetry around. Now, there is a question here already. The second question, this one's from Dry Amontillado, and they say, as you write about the non-human world, do you try to imagine the experience of the animals, or would it be presumptuous to think that we can write about animals from a non-human perspective? And so that is a really interesting question. Whether the topic is, climate change or wildfire or the other things we've been talking about, you know, poetry, a poem is a little empathy machine. You're trying to put yourself into somebody else's shoes, but animals don't even wear shoes, And so, but I mean, it's such a bigger leap to put yourself and imagine yourself as an animal versus a human. So, is that something that a challenge that you think about?
It is, yeah. I'm actually working on a children's novella about the gulls now, and they're writing a children's book for young middle grade readers. It's probably necessary more to anthropomorphize, have the animals talking and so forth. But when I'm doing poetry like we're reading now, I try to be careful of not doing too much of that, because the creatures, of course, have their own kind of, well, logic, if you can call it that, and the reasons they do things. And in fact, after my wife and I have lived with these birds on the roof and outside and everything, still some things of their behavior we find interesting. You don't necessarily understand why they do these things even after years, and that's simply because they're following dictates and so forth that we don't have. Maybe our ancestors distantly had them, but maybe not. And so, yeah, it's a difficult balance to find between trying to study and enter into a world of non-human creatures, but without humanizing them too much. I see quite a lot on social media, and obviously, as you can imagine, like anyone with nature, I get lots of videos and stuff coming off of creatures, and that's great. But very often people try and interpret the creature's behavior in human terms, and that can be a bit misleading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting too. Just that question of how much the animals know what's going on. There are two things I think of when COVID happened. And I at that time I lived up in the mountains of Southern California in a small town, and I would take my kids on hikes constantly, which I did normally, before COVID, but during COVID it was like every day. And there was a real noticeable difference in the number of animals just out. It was the year of the rabbit. Like there were bunnies everywhere, and then there were coyotes, chasing the bunnies. And there were more animals than there usually are during COVID. And I guess maybe, I don't know, it was like they knew. That was a strange thing. And then you mentioned fire too. In September, we had a fire. The town was evacuated for about 2 weeks. And leading up to that, there was a strange thing where the squirrels were gone, and people were talking about, in town. It was sort of the gossip of the town. What's going on with the squirrels? We usually have squirrels in our backyard. Do you? And everybody was sort of talking about that on the message boards and social media and things. And then a couple weeks later, the fire came, and then after the fire, the squirrels returned. And so, I mean, I don't know. There's something sort of beyond the beyond that things seem to know. And maybe it's that we, of course, as Jimmy Pappas points out, we're animals too. Yes, that's actually true, believe it or not. But maybe it's that we don't. We have so much going on that we don't listen to what what nature can be listening to. Do you find that in all your thoughts?
I do. And in the gull poem that I read before about dinosaurs on the roof, I talk about how much I've learned from them. I mean, I really don't know what they've learned from us. We can guess, but of course I can't know. But in terms of what we learned from them, is not only the individual personalities, but also their approach to things, and the fact that there was a kind of a logic in the fact that in the ancient world, humans used to observe birds and other creatures, because they, as you've just said, could be aware of things that humans weren't, weather and other problems. So yeah, I like the fact of trying to learn about them, but also as much as we can to learn from them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned writing a children's novel, and I think you've written other novels in the past too. So,
Yep.
so I'm curious about what it is that draws you to poetry, and you're moving around different forms of literature. What is it that draws you to poetry versus other things, and why do you pick some topics for poems and some topics for prose?
Yeah, my approach, Tim, with poetry is, as I've said, to try and create beauty and compressed language that tends to go towards shorter poems. First thing when I try to write prose, I'm trying to write something that's visual and rapid and clear, and maybe there's a kind of poetry to it, but it's rather different than elaborating in the way you do with poetry. And certain topics, I find like gulls for a children's story give quite a lot of material because the characters and the different things they do, stealing from shops and stuff. There's a lot like that. But something like observing the aftermath of a bushfire. Well, you'd be struggling, I think, to write a long work of prose about just that. But for a poem, it's a sort of a mini kind of apocalyptic setting with a bit of hope, with the germinating. It's I see them as two very, very different very different things. And so poetry allows me to do things that I don't feel that I can do anyway with prose.
Yeah. Do you know when you sit down to write any given time what you're going to be writing? Do you know that you're working on this poem or you're going to be working on this, or do you just start going and then see where your imagination takes you?
For me, they're completely separate things. And in fact, I usually find, I don't know if other writers have this, but I generally find if I'm in the zone writing poetry, I can't write prose, and vice versa. It's either one or the other, which is a bit of a limitation, but that's how I find it, because my process of, as I've said, collecting ideas and phrases for poetry is wildly different than with prose, where you're thinking about narrative and characters and dialogue and all that stuff. So completely different. Yeah. So it's a bit frustrating for me actually, because if I'm in the middle of doing one of them, I physically can't do the other until I've had some time off and cleared my head and started a new sheet of paper, so to speak.
That is really interesting. It is a different mental space, I guess, that poetry occupies versus writing prose, and it does take something different. So how long have you wanted to be a writer? Is it something that you always focused on when you were out in that small town in Australia? Is that something you thought of doing, or was there something that incited you into writing itself?
I've always been very, very interested in writing, but coming down there, like in back when I was a kid, no internet or anything, was really isolated. And so the idea that someone could become a writer, just something never occurred to me. Only really occurred to me when I went to university up in the city. So, but for a long time I've wanted to, and so some of the poems, even this book, go back about 15 years, and other poems I've done go back even further than that. So yeah, it's been a long process.
Yeah. Do you remember the first poem you fell in love with, and why? I think most people first probably gravitate toward books, novels, and things like that, unless there's some kind of thing that draws them into poetry. Was there something that drew you into poetry?
Yeah, we had. Fortunately, both my parents were readers, and we had an old, very beautifully bound volume of English classic poetry. I think the first one, and this is actually right on topic, the first one that really captivated me when I was a kid was William Blake's The Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright. And there's nature again. And not a new thing to say, obviously a very famous poem, but in just a few words and relatively simple diction, it creates the atmosphere of the wonder of nature and how it came to be and so forth, and how different, strikingly different, but amazingly beautiful it is. And so yeah, that's I would say that was my first real entry into poetry, and thinking, wow, that's something that remains with me.
Yeah, and we did that Irish Poets issue a couple of years ago, and one of the fascinating and wonderful things about Ireland is how much poetry is a part of the culture. And I think, we do have a lot of subscribers, and there is a great poetry community in Australia, but it doesn't seem as infused with poetry as Ireland does. And so, having lived in both places, what's your experience with the different sort of literary world and how poetry is received in both places? Do you feel when you moved back? Because I don't know how long ago you went back to Ireland, but did you feel a shift in the way that poetry was received and treated in the two different places?
Yeah, I've been living in Ireland for nearly 10 years now. Up until then, before then, I'd lived in the United Kingdom and Italy. I've been out of Australia for a very long time,
Oh,
but
okay.
it is wildly different, I would say. But presumably, if we have any Australians here, they might not appreciate me saying it, but my impression was that it's very marginal down there, and it seemed a bit of a strange thing to want to do. Whereas Ireland is known as as you know, the island of poets and saints. So I haven't found many saints since I've been here, but certainly poets there are a lot. And yes, it's a really central part of the culture. And I also understand, although I don't really speak the language, the Irish language itself is naturally extremely poetic, and probably some of that carries over into certainly the older poets who grew up knowing, or at least partly speaking Irish as well. But yeah, it's wildly different, and it's sort of great to be in a community that takes it so seriously as an important part of culture.
Yeah, what do you think the root of that is? I asked a few people from the Irish Poets issue too what they thought about it, and why poetry has such a home there. When here in the United States, it's like anywhere else. It's sort of a strange thing to be doing, to be reading poetry. If there's a poetry reading, you get a few seats in the chair, but not many at a bookstore or whatever, and you're happy with that, but in Ireland, it's something serious, and they've maintained that for such a long time. Do you have any sense of why that is?
I think it has strong historical roots, Tim, that there was in a sense, probably the golden age for Irish specific culture was like thousands of years ago, because as you know, the Romans never reached Ireland. And so there was this local culture that took poetry extremely seriously, and they had a sort of as I understand it, kind of sort of universities, not a written culture, but this was in verbal and by memory, where people had to study for many years, memorizing classics and so forth, to be able to become poets. The bards, they took it very seriously. And then since in the last 900 years or so, since the English Normans occupied Ireland, I think it's been one of those aspects of Irish culture that has been taken very seriously as a way of preserving something that was notably Irish in the face of all this other outside intervention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question. Jimmy Pappas wanted to know about the supernatural. He says this discussion is focused on science, but in Ireland, the elements of the supernatural are stronger too, in addition to poetry. And I've always wondered if that's related in some way, like that the mythological lives in the oral tradition maybe more strongly. But do you have any... are your interests, purely sort of scientific, or is there any kind of supernatural element to anything that you think about with regard to the climate, or the planet, the Gaia kind of theory and things like that? Or do you think there's more to it than atoms bouncing into each other, or is that your focus?
Oh, that's a difficult question. Gets into areas that I probably don't know that much about. Yeah, personally, I've never had an experience that in the cold light of day, would put down as being sort of supernatural. Personally, I know lots of other people have, but no, my own view is that there's enough in evolution and solving the puzzles of how amazing creatures came about and how things are as they are. There's enough in that, in the scientific, or you might say materialist view. I would say someone who grew up in Ireland might better be able to talk about the local mythology and so forth. See, I grew up on the other side of the world with stories about Ireland and everything, but it's not the same as growing up here. So, but I'm sure other born and bred Irish people have a different view.
Yeah. Well, I think is it Arthur C. Clarke or somebody who said that you know, magic is undiscovered science, to paraphrase. And I, there is the explanations for things are fascinating, especially when you get down to the root level of our biology, at the cellular, and all the strange things that happen there. It is magic and amazing that we exist and can, that life itself sprung out of primordial soup, and now we can see and talk, let alone talk over Zoom. That's pretty magical and special to me. Let's see. Well, let's hear another poem, Stuart. Yeah, I think we have two left, and that's a good time for it.
Yeah, the last section is about Antarctica, and I've always been fascinated by the fact that Australia and Antarctica were sort of twin continents that were fused tens of millions of years ago in a giant continent called Gondwana. But since then, they've followed very different paths. Australia's drifted north, and still is, and becoming increasingly hotter. Antarctica, of course, became frozen. And so I found that very interesting. And in practical terms, because Australia is relatively close there, the Australian Antarctic Territory is the biggest part of Antarctica. So Australia has a lot of focus and responsibility for Antarctica. So, but what intrigues me for this next poem, which is a sort of attempt at a mini epic, is that Antarctica is the only continent that never had native human population. Obviously, there's scientists that stay there now. And so I tried in this poem to give that continent a mythology that it never had. So this is called Antarctic Voices. Sometimes when the wind here talks, it tells me things that science will never say. How long ago, by different stars, the gods of night and day agreed to split the year between them. That jutting rocks above the snow are the eggs of enormous stone birds, and every iceberg is a wayward child running away from home. How the sky god bled the world of colour to make the southern lights. That rolling balls of snow are tossed around by baby giants, while their parents' snores from underground pile up stacks of frozen steam, and that the penguins march away each year to seek the trick of flight. And how much more the cold would tell me if I could catch its icy tongue.
Yeah, another poem that makes beauty out of that, Antarctic Voices by S.C. Flynn, from his book, The Colour of Extinction. It's interesting, too. I was just reading an article a couple days ago about how the earliest bird fossils are found in Antarctica, actually. It's a recent discovery. And it seems that Antarctica, at the time when the dinosaurs were going extinct, was sort of a safe haven from the cataclysmic devastation that asteroid caused. Life still was able to sort of tuck and hide there in Antarctica. And that is how, dinosaurs survived and evolved through to birds to this day. So it's really interesting, too, to think about that Antarctica being a place to hide out from the devastation of humanity, too. And sort of like a seed vault down there. And so that's really fascinating. Have you thought about going there, or have you explored the possibility? Because I do. Alan Fox, our founder of Rattle, went to Antarctica, and it was fascinating for him. Sort of life-changing trip.
I have thought about it, but it's extremely difficult to get to, and would be a long and expensive commitment. So it's something that I've certainly thought about it, but I don't know whether it will ever happen. I'd love to, though.
Yeah. Well, so we talked about the various things you did in poetry and the novels. What are you working on now? Do you have any? You have the children's book, the children's novel you're working on. How do you know what you're doing next? How do you know which mode to be put into?
It's not that predictable, actually. I sort of just found, as when I've been reading from this book, people responded pretty well to the gulls, how the different personalities I mentioned in that poem, which is not the only gull poem in the book, so I thought maybe I could explore that in an expanded format. And what's coming up next, Tim? There is a Rattle connection, because my poem that was in Rattle in the Irish number going back couple of years now, is actually in my next collection. Here's a chance to move into that. That's coming out in May this year with a publisher in Melbourne, Australia, Renard Press. And that's called The Ocean of Hope. And, An Ocean Called Hope, yes. And my poem from Rattle is one of the ones about returning to Ireland and what it means to be living in Ireland. And obviously, when those come up, depends to a large extent on the publisher's schedule. But anyway, that's in May. And so you sort of have to work around those deadlines and so forth. Apart from that, I sort of, in the background, when I'm working on poetry, write, as I've said, whatever sort of presents itself to me as being ready to be written.
Yeah, how do you decide where to publish? Being so international in your journey in life. Going from Australia to the UK, Italy, and Ireland. And then publishing back in Australia for this next book. Do you feel sort of international as a writer and sort of reaching everywhere, or is there a certain place that you feel is your literary home?
I suppose by now I do feel pretty international. Probably, as I said, Ireland is my spiritual home, where my family came from originally. But naturally, having grown up and lived into my adulthood in Australia, you can't help having that as well. But yeah, I sort of like to think of myself as international as well. And the Italian connection is not something that I write about, but that's my second language, and my wife's Italian, so there's quite a big connection there as well.
Yeah. One last question, then we'll do the last poem too. I always wonder about this, and we sort of touched on it earlier, but what is it that you're hoping to do with the poems? When you sit down to write poems from the Colour of Extinction, what do you hope the effect will be on the world that they exist? In the face of so much devastation across the globe and what we're doing to the environment. Why do you think poetry matters in the face of it all, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that everything we've seen for generations now makes you, I suppose, you have to be a bit realistic about the extent to which art can affect major change in the world. If you go back 100 years, you can see various visionaries in that time were convinced that the art was going to create a new world. And so we have to be a bit realistic about the extent to which that, as I said, being my modest ambitions about it, being inducing a little bit of beauty, hoping that someone out there can pick up on a bit of that beauty, maybe be introduced to something that they weren't aware of before, and start them on a path of looking into things and passing it on maybe to someone else. No, so I hope that doesn't sound negative, but I think that the days of expecting art to make massive, rapid change in the world, that hope I don't think is valid anymore from what we've seen. Obviously, I'd love to be wrong on that, but I think just about everything that we have seen indicates that's right to be cautious.
Yeah. Well, let's close out with one last poem, Antarctic Yellow.
Yeah, this one is about belonging, and you mentioned the question of being international and where I feel I belong or whatever. And this one, feeling about in a continent like Antarctica, where humans never actually had developed a civilization, how can you belong there? So this is called Antarctic Yellow. You've come all this way for the southern lights, but they're on strike again. Then someone says, let's go see the snow petrel, the cute white dove that bathes in the snow of the continent of peace. And on the way, you wonder if you could belong like the petrel. But it's far to these rocks, and you learn what cold can mean. So you ask yourself if you really need to see Antarctica or just to know that it's down here somewhere. Then this bird that's guarding its chick spits hot yellow stuff in your face. It stinks of fish and won't come off. And you'll wear this colour and smell like an oily tattoo. Now you can say you belong.
Yeah, that's great. I love that image, the oily tattoo at the end. That was Antarctic yellow. Fascinating story. Thanks so much for sharing that, Stuart. It's been a pleasure talking to you and sharing this book.
Likewise.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's been great, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Yep, thanks a lot. Yeah, and that was S.C. Flynn. His new book, of course, is The Colour of Extinction, which you can find at his website, scflynn.com. And now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week is to write an elegy that's not about a person. That's your prompt for this week. Write an elegy that's not about a person. And now if you'd like to participate, if you have a poem for that prompt and only that prompt, share it. First, email your poem to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com. Then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to share on Facebook and YouTube. Just join the Zoom, but only if you want to share a poem about this week's prompt. Do that. A reminder that we want to have the max time on camera about 3 minutes. So if it's a shorter poem, we can chat more. If it's a longer poem, we should probably be quick about it. It's a 1-page max on the poem length. These rules are in place just so we can get to everybody. And, because we really want to share as many poems and poets as we can in the prompt lines. So share your poems and jump on the Zoom if you'd like. If you just want to keep watching and enjoying the poetry, though, wherever you are right now is the best place to be, because that way you can see the poems as the poets are reading too. But if you have a poem to share, jump over on the Zoom, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back with our prompt poems editor, Katie Dozier. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great. It's so funny to have coffee with the Rattlecast.
I know, it is bizarre. So we do have a special announcement, of course, of the Prompt Poet of the Month coming up in a little bit. The Prompt Poet is not here at the moment. They're traveling, and so we're going to keep in suspense when they can pop in and jump on and share their poem.
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully. If not, well, I don't know. Did we decide what we're going to do?
We can wait till next week, I think, maybe. But so hopefully, I think they will.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so in the meantime, let's let's do the prompt for this week.
Yep.
And so the prompt for this week, once again, was to put it on the screen right here. Write an elegy that's not about a person. And so what did you go with, Katie?
Well, I've been having all these dreams with elephants in them for some reason.
Uh-huh.
And so I kind of followed that.
Interesting. Well, I can confirm.
I know. I wake up and like, there's another elephant.
Another elephant. And you were obsessed with the idea of an elephant being on the plane when we flew back from California.
Yeah, I know, because it was a weight restricted flight with like 20 people on it. And I was like, I think there's an elephant on this plane. And I did not drop this theory. And there was no indication that this was correct, basically, also.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay, so the prompt for this week. Oops, hang on a second. If I bump this thing, it does it. 1 second. There we go.
Okay.
So your poem was this. Go ahead.
Elegy to a Stuffed Elephant. I hope the Amazon delivery driver is going to listen to my poem,
I
too.
hope so, too.
Elegy to a Stuffed Elephant. Let's lament the loss of a tuft of your white fluff that peeked out from your ketchup-stained trunk. How you were never quite the same after Sarah sat on you. No one is really warmed by a 2D hug. I know nests must grow cold or else fledglings would never take the chance to leave them. I can't even say if it was you or me that stomped away, ashamed by all your scars. But I do remember tracing your soft folds of gray, sneaking peanuts up to my room to feed you secrets you would never forget. The flies that couldn't be swatted away by a tail or culled by an adult's common sense. You listened and were thrown away, but not today.
Oh, yeah. Great poem. And you can see that elephant so clearly.
And what I did too, I know it's very uncommon to have an elegy to something. It makes it almost more sound like an ode. But what I was trying to do was make it like the elephant is still alive because I'm doing it to the elephant. Because it's kind of like, bringing that poor stuffed animal back to life.
Aw, kind of like Bing Bong.
Yeah, I like Bing Bong. He became my Bing Bong from Inside Out. You're right.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Inside Out, that is the best kids movie for adults to watch.
It is really nice.
It really is
People
good.
can learn a lot from that movie.
Yeah.
Inside Out too, not as much.
Yeah, I still haven't seen Inside Out too, but
we saw that in theaters with the kids.
You're right. Well, that's how unmemorable it was, I guess.
Yeah.
That's true.
All right. So your poem is probably not about Inside Out too.
It is not about Inside Out. Elegy to Inside Out. My poem was this. It's a short little poem. I like to try to occasionally do a little short one because I would love to be able to write great short poems, and I don't know. I don't just like to write great long poems.
I think you write great short haiku.
Oh,
that definitely counts.
Okay, well, this is an attempt at a short poem. It's only 6 lines here, and this is Elegy for Illusionment. How easy it was when a blanket of air caught the smog of the city, and the sun was a coin in the curtain. Now the clean sea of the clouds erases the valley. Every little peak is an island to be reached, it's certain. Little poem, Elegy for Illusionment. That was my poem of the week. And now let's see. We'll see if we'll go to our prompt lines and see what other people wrote. And let's go to our rating for the moment for the next 5 minutes. Prompt Poet of the Month, Jared Campbell.
Yeah, sneaking in.
Sneaking in. Yeah. Hey, Jared, how you doing? Interesting. And why did you choose Prairie Dog? As I pull it up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love. The prairie dog maintained it from within, turning the soil, letting in the air and water, doing the invisible work. The true prairie is the invisible one, the roots and critters that persist untroubled by the prairie fire, a density of life, a wild diversity unrivaled anywhere except a rainforest or a coral reef. Prairie dogs were the architects of paradise, digging burrows, joining burrows into towns. I've spoken less of what the prairie dog is than what it does, ignoring its complex systems of communication and social structures, and that's appropriate. Things are what they do, and if what they do is not useful, they die. By useful, of course, I mean useful to the right people. Everybody's useful to himself. This poem doesn't have the neat, stressed out rows of most of my poems. If it has any musicality, it's hiding under the surface, and hidden music is worse than none at all. Don't bury the life of a poem. Pull it out in the sunshine where it can be of use. Plow it up. Plant your rows of golden wheat, kill the pests, and never notice what you're missing.
Yeah, beautiful poem, and then great pictures of prairie dogs too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I do have to ask one question, Jared. Why are you wearing Eagles green instead
This
of?
is not green.
Oh,
This
it's
is
green.
This is black.
Well,
This is black and yellow.
my green is very intentional.
Yeah, it's not no green today.
It's the dress situation
Oh
going
yeah, it
on.
looks so
Yeah, we're
green.
having a
It's so
dress
weird.
situation.
It does look green on our screen.
Well,
So
have fun
I did-
watching the game.
I did empathy for buffalo last week and empathy for prairie dogs this week.
That's good.
So,
it is. Well, thanks so much for being here, Jared. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Jared.
And now let's go to our prompt poet of the month, new prompt poet of the month, and it's none other than Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Can I clap for myself?
Yes,
Definitely
you
can.
certainly can.
Yeah, great to see
Well,
you.
I'll snap on a poetry call. And yes, I did think of writing an elegy for our beloved Buffalo Bills, but
Well, congratulations. And we also have to say you are the first two-time prompt poet of the month because you were the prompt poet last year. I'm trying to remember exactly what month it was. I think it was June.
Something like
I
that.
want to say, yeah. So congratulations on that front too.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always a surprise. And as I wrote to you, I just I got my three rejections, and I had forgotten about the fourth poem, and it hadn't come through. And normally, when I get rejections, I'm sort of, for a moment, a little peakish, but I just felt such gratitude for what you're doing and the work that goes into it and the continued creation of this community. So,
Well, that's wonderful
and
to
then
hear.
I got the accepted poem, and I was thinking, well, it's good to have gratitude.
The funny thing about that too is that when it is a poet that I know is very much part of the Rattle community, like yourself or like Jared Campbell or like Himmet Malik, I have extra fun with sending the acceptance. So I actually delayed slightly because I wanted you to start thinking like, hey, maybe this one got through, or maybe I'm going to get at least a personalized rejection on this or something. So I was telling Tim, I was like, no, I just got to send it. I'm anticipating it more than he could possibly. So I have fun with it.
Yeah, you do pay more attention, I think, than anybody, Dick, and we always really appreciate that, knowing things that I miss. So thanks so much for doing that. So what which poem was it? Say and explain why you chose this one, Katie.
Sure. So this was the prompt that was to write a poem after Denise Duhamel, where you start it with poem in which, just like her winning chapbook in which, and then you do a random verb from randomwordgenerator.com or wherever, and then you craft your poem based on that. And I thought, Dick, you went in such an interesting direction here, and I love overall the tenderness of this poem. So would you share it for us?
I sure will, and I will note it is in my never-ending series of what we might call love poems. And it was one that I hadn't shown my first reader, which is Debbie.
Aw.
And she said, the tag is in the wrong goddamn place. It should be on the back of your neck where tags go. when I read it to her last night.
Oh,
So
that's funny. I love the knee because I feel like the neck would get a little bit unintentionally gruesome in a way. So the knee is cuter.
well, anyway, so it's called Poem in Which I Inspect the Fabric Care Label, after Denise Duhamel. I never noticed the tag sewn so discreetly behind my knee. I guess my mother was afraid to clip it off. Maybe she thought, do not remove under penalty of law was meant for her. My wife noted it before I did. What's this? She said as she thumbed at it absently. She held a mirror for me to read the fine print. Made of flesh and insecurities. Washed gently, hand dry, prone to wonder if he is loved, no matter how tenderly treated. She nuzzled her cheek on my chest, stroked the loose skin on my neck, then turned over and headed towards sleep. The label fluttered against my calf, and I understood why it was not wise to detach it. How else was I to understand why, even with her caress still humming and 40 years of knowing the answer is yes? I fret over what she'll think of me, pulling her close and folding the soft fabric of her into the care label of me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. That was Dick Westheimer's poem in which I inspect the fabric care label. We should say, too, we're going to make this instead of, we could have done it Tuesday, but we thought it'd be fun to make it the Valentine's Day poem.
I wanted this Dick Westheimer love poem for Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
so everyone will have a nice Valentine's Day getting to read this poem, I think.
Yeah, so we're going to postpone it a little bit and put this out as the poem of the day on Friday. Yeah. So I did it again.
I appreciate it. And I did send a prompt poem in for today, which, if you can fit it, I have to leave to go to a play by 2:00. So if you can fit it in, I'd appreciate it. And
Yeah, let's do that, Dick. Why don't you go ahead and read that poem too?
Okay.
You've got to take your privilege. This is the prompt poet of the month privilege is reading 2 poems.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of times we haven't come back, though, is the thing. It's Dick alluding to. But we want to make sure
I know,
he
we
catches his
can't, though.
play in
You got to
time.
go to your play. That seems fair.
Well, it was just great of you to show up. I don't know. Oh, you're at the theater, aren't you?
Yeah. He drove down early so that he could do this because he wanted to be driving right at the moment we needed him to do it. So thank you for that, too.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all. Okay, the elegy, an older man's elegy for winter. I stumbled into the oh shit of winter, fell like the last autumn walnut thunking onto the tool shed's metal roof. My joints ached, and I felt stunned and helpless against the cold. Shivering settled between my shoulders, and no amount of clothes worn about the house kept me warm. But the season and I came to some accord. This season, blessedly few chores called to me. There was much bread to be made, and the snow came and drew me outside, first from necessity, then with some satisfaction as I felt how well the shovel fit my hand, how the plows scraping the gravel drives sung such a tune as I'd heard 100 times before, since the tractor was new. And yes, there's no warmth as warm as coming inside from the cold. Now, just past the cross-quarter day, I steel myself for winter's demise and all the work early spring brings, pruning the peaches, thinning blueberry buds, oiling hoe handles, counting seeds, cleaning pots, contemplating weeds. All the work that once stirred the yearnings of a younger me who'd have welcomed winter's passing as opportunity.
Oh, great last line, too. Another little subtle rhyme there at the end. This is an older man's elegy for winter. Yeah, great poem, Dick.
And you have to love the example of winning prompt poet of the month and right back into the fire with another poem. So thanks so much for always writing so many poems to all the prompts and being such an important part of the community.
Appreciate you all so much. Thanks so much. Off to the play.
Have a nice play. Hey.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Dick. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, that was Dick Westheimer with 2 poems, this week's prompt and his prompt poem of the month, which, of course, is going to be shared on Friday. Now let's go back to the Zoom and see who we've got. Let's go to Hemant Malik. Speaking of Australia, as we did very much today.
And a former prompt poet of the month.
And another former prompt poet. Yeah,
Hi.
3 prompt poets of the month leading off the chart. Hey, Hemant, how you doing?
Great, thank you. It's a bit sleepy.
What time is it there?
That's right. I should have. Yeah, glad we got to you first because you either got to go to bed or something.
What time is it?
Oh no, I did. I slept for 3 hours, so it's not too bad. It's 5:30 now.
Oh,
Oh,
Hemet.
wow.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so sweet. Well, we're extra
That's
glad you're
okay.
here.
Yeah, we
Aw.
definitely are. Yeah, thanks so much for putting up with us, Chip.
I'm glad to be. Okay. I hope it works as an elegy. We'll see. Time flies.
Okay.
I mourn the moment, burdened with my load, weighted with my history, its fabric frayed from trying, but still no hope of rising from the land. Its pale blue wings strain to lift beneath, too brown, too thick, too plain. It looks up with eyes brimming at adjacent moments, zipping in uncluttered skies, their tails flicking with squeals and cries of glee. What karma bound this moment to one like me? I pet its head, my poor laden moment, whisper my sorries again, and set down its line to dream of skies in sleep.
Yeah, beautiful line in there. Time
Yeah.
flies. I think that works as an elegy
Yeah, I
for
think
sure.
so too. Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Hopefully, time flies today, and you aren't too tired. Also.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks so much,
Thank
Hemet. Yeah,
Thank you.
I always appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Thanks.
There was a Hemet Malik with Time Flies. Let's go next to a first-time caller. Lola Willis is here. Hey, Lola.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so where are you calling from?
I'm from Louisiana,
Great.
not New Orleans.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. I did follow the prompt. It's for a person, but it's not about a person.
I like
This
that
is
distinction.
for, right. This is for my late daughter Rain, who was detransitioning when she passed. It's called The Day She Died. It hurt too much for her to keep wearing skirts, to part her hair on the side. Smoke slid off her eyelids, an ink smeared pronoun. So the S died on bare lips, and he limped away half a word.
What a powerful
Thank
poem.
you.
Yeah. So sorry for that loss.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Take care. And hope you come back soon,
Yeah,
too.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Well,
That was really powerful. Sorry, I'm a little speechless after.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. There's Lola Willis with The Day She Died. Let's go next to Kimberly Gibson Tran.
Hello.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hey, Kimberly, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm going to follow that with a very unserious elegy
Okay.
for my
Well, we love
husband's.
variety. It's always great. So I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of silly, but I didn't really know how to write an elegy, so I Googled like, what is an elegy? And Wikipedia told me that the Greeks used these elegiac couplets in dactylic hexameter with a line of dactylic pentameter. So I tried that, but I think I realized dactyls aren't really great in English, but here we go.
This is the advanced version of the
Yeah,
prompt.
really,
Way to
wow.
go, Kimberly. Yeah.
Elegy for my husband's broken comb. Woe upon woe is the comb of my man when he rises to groom himself. Gone are its tines, all but 3 bitty spines at the tapering end. They got caught in the strands of my tangling mane as I yanked and I yanked. His hair's fine, mine is long, and it likes to hold on to the thin little blades. I should brush with the brush that was made to withstand. It has bristles that flex. It's not hard as a bone like the sad, brittle comb. But I hate to go digging in drawers full of numerous implements, all for my hair. It's not fair. Yes, I know. He's just got that one comb on the countertop. Well, here I come once again, late for work, and I grab at the plastic already at hand. It breaks up in my hand.
That's really
great,
funny.
yeah.
And I can definitely relate. Tim has like one comb and I have a
That's
lot of
true.
hair stuff. So
That
and
is true.
sometimes I'm still tempted though. It looks so nice, and so simple.
It is a simple life. All right.
Thanks for humoring me.
Yeah, that was
Thanks for
great. Thanks so
sharing
much.
it. And good luck to the comb.
Yeah, well, that was Kimberly Gibson Tran with an elegy for my husband's broken comb. Very nice. All right, let's go to Brian O'Sullivan next.
Hello.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. It is longish, so I should probably just read it.
Okay.
All right.
It is called Elegy for Rhetoric, a double upside down sonnet.
Nice.
She was born to the enslaved of Sicily and Syracuse, and she came up in squalor amid the refuse of tyrants' orgies and bloody martial games. Her parents fervently hoped for better things from her, so they revolted, shattering chains of steel and feel. She'd bow no more to kings, but would plant words and harvest arguments, not claiming certainty, but sifting topics through thy certain plausibility, the human lot. That's what was meant to be, or it was the legend later churned up by those who needed to justify their cunning crafts, the lawyers, con men, and pugilist debaters. They made her legacy an ugly running joke and waved her like a flag of haters. Millennia later, I happened to meet her in college, in a field in the back of the library behind the knowledge. She'd aged quite badly. As an art, she appeared to be dead, but her lines held subtle traces of possibility. They were almost like scripture, and yet the more I read, the more I saw in her an antidote to certainty. Not the cruciform truth I learned in Catholic school, but the hopeful yes we can in the public square. She was a rabble-rouser, and only a fool would follow her to a demagogic nightmare, I was assured by those who were in power. They had a point. But I wonder if she'll ever be allowed to join with poets in letting small truths flower in a world where facts keep pouring from the cloud.
Yeah, I love that form.
Yeah.
Really, the upside down sonnet is interesting. And then I have two of them. There's like that break almost that the couplet at the top creates. It's really neat.
Yeah, I have to ask what inspired you to write in this form because it's so unusual and interesting.
So I kind of was inspired by having a couplet that I wanted to start with, but still
That
wanting to write
helps.
it in the form of a sonnet. But my other philosophical reason is I kind of wanted to move from certainty towards uncertainty instead of the other way around. I always think
neat.
the couplet gives like more resolution than this should have, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really nice, and I think more poems should be written in that direction. I'm terrible about not doing it, and I always kind of wish I had more poems. So maybe you'll inspire me to be a rabble rouser also, because I love that word also.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Brian O'Sullivan with Elegy for Rhetoric, a double upside down sonnet.
Also
Really
doubles as a dessert option.
Oh,
for the
yeah.
Super Bowl, I feel like.
Well, Super Bowl's coming up. Let's go. I saw Nivedita, and if I'm doing the math right, it's like 1 a.m. there.
Oh, Nivi.
So let's go to Nivi next.
Hello.
Hey, Nivi, how you doing?
Hi.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Kit. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you guys?
Yeah,
Good,
we're doing
thanks.
great. Great to see you. And it is like it's like 1 a.m. there, isn't it?
12:30.
Aw,
Okay.
thanks for being here, Nivi.
No, I mean, I don't mind this because I could actually catch the show live for a change, like the interview and everything. Usually I catch it bits and pieces in between work and then I rerun through the whole thing in the evening after work. So at least today I could get to the whole thing.
Oh, that's
good.
great. Yeah, well, so glad that is the nice thing about shifting times. We get, it's tough for some people, but much better for others, and that
Yeah.
works out. Yeah. So what was your elegy? What did you have for us?
So, I mean, I'm from India and we have a lot of cultures, a lot of history, and a lot of languages. But sadly, of late, many of those languages, especially those that are spoken by very few people, like certain tribes in certain areas, they're getting lost to the world. And there's like very, very few really elderly people who know how to still speak those languages. And it's not really being passed down to generations. And I think it's such a shame that we're losing so much of culture. And I think this is also true in many places around the world, I must say. So mine is an elegy for a forgotten language.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, important topic.
Elegy for a forgotten language. The old man speaks, but his words drift like smoke, curling into the air, unseen, unheard. Once his tongue held stories woven like silk, names of rivers, the scent of rain before it fell. The village children do not answer. They speak in clipped words, borrowed sounds. His wife had whispered in the old tongue, as she traced lullabies into their daughter's palm. Now that daughter struggles to recall the way vowels curved like branches in the wind. The last speaker sighs, watches the river flow. No one left to name it the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, very beautiful poem. Elegy for a Forgotten Language. Thanks so much for sharing
Thanks,
that, Nivi.
Nivi. Have a great
Thank you.
night.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
night. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, take
Have
care.
a good day.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
we
Thank
got
you,
the
you too.
reversal. I was
Yeah,
really
me
hoping for that. I was excited to burn some time.
All right, thanks, Nivi. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Nivi de Karthik with Elegy for a Forgotten Language. Next, we'll go to, I believe, a first-time caller, Carlos Ornelas. Are you here, Carlos? Let's see. Oh, there.
Yes.
There we go.
Hi.
Hey, yeah, thanks for being here.
Hello. Yeah. So I wrote elegy for the literary canon.
Oh, interesting topic. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. The loss of false hidden causes. You shall be missed, your heart of darkness, heart of Faulkner, heart of frost, heartless paradise is lost, hemming ways where grapes been tossed, with wrath and plath, tulips to plant. We howled the wind of mice and men. We heard To Kill a Mockingbird. A murder of crows was not preferred. A raven haven for a maiden. The death of a nation, reincarnation. The death of deaf communication. Literature, you have no eyes. This is the elegy of lies. This is Caesar's second fall. Maybe justice is for all. May be just is in her all. Elegy for canonation with no need for registration. That's all I have. I'm sorry I didn't finish.
Oh, that's great.
No,
Well,
that's
yeah,
really
thanks for
great. I
sharing
love
that.
the rhymes in that, and then weaving in the rhymes with the names of classic literature is really interesting.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Thank you.
Where are you calling
Thank
from, Carlos?
I'm calling from Long Beach, California.
Oh, very cool. Well, so glad you could be here.
Yeah,
and
hope you come back.
Yeah, come back soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Great prompt, by the way.
Thanks, Carlos.
Yeah, thanks. It was Carlos Ornelas with Elegy for Literary Culture. Yeah.
Canon.
Canon.
I think
That's the
canon?
word. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we didn't have it on the screen.
Yeah,
so
because
couldn't see
we
it.
usually have it in there. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so much, Carlos, for sharing that. Let's go next to Tina Denniclaw.
Okay. I'm writing a note to Stephen. I'm always Carlos, I'm sorry. A little behind here. So I'm unmuted now, correct?
Yeah, we got
Yep,
you. Yep, we got
unmuted.
you.
Okay.
Yep.
My husband's making coffee in the background, so that's the clattering. All right. Okay. So, so I'll just read my poem. Mom has cooked long enough. Her daughter declared it, so it was no more Yummy's Chinese. And 20 years later, we still don't know where to get great pot stickers. That fancy train station by the tracks, 2 blocks from 4th Street, housed the best Hofbrau we knew. 60 years in business, closed by a rent hike. 7 years later, still empty. The man who owned the deli on my way to work made the best chicken salad ever, and he put Andy's mint in my lunch bags. Then suddenly, out. H&R Block bought his space. Is Get Drunk Noodles known only to Krung Tep Thai? We watched their daughter grow from the child, from the child reading in a corner. I didn't know I'd cry. To the teenager in heavy boots under long filmy skirts, waiting tables. As an undergrad, she lost her backpack and all those expensive books. Now, she's a lawyer. We helped pay for her years of learning as we ate the tom kha gai and praram lung song her mom cooked. Daughter done with school, Fitye and Mayuri sold their restaurant, and stopped working. In the deep end of the local pool, I swam with retired Mayuri on Thursday afternoons. She enjoyed her solace, and I enjoyed her quiet company. Not wanting to disturb her peace, I never told her. No one else makes get-drunk noodles. So I forgot to say hi to you guys. I was so worried about the noise in the background.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, but we have the photo too. Yeah, we have the photo too that we're sharing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So, here, I'm not even looking.
That's right. Well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Tina. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You showed the photo and I just didn't see it. Huh?
Yeah.
That's okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's always...
Enjoy your coffee, Tina. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I need it. Okay.
I need
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Tina. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was Tina Denetclaw with Mom Has Cooked Long Enough.
Also, I'm hungry now.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry too. When we started this thing, it was not. We usually eat. This is the time we usually eat. So
Yeah,
right
for
now.
the first time.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's go. And now Rose Renard is here from the UK. One of those poets who usually can't make it and now can. So it's great to see you, Rose. How you doing?
Yeah, great. I've got a cold actually, but I think I'm all right to read. But it's great to be able to be on, and yeah, really good.
Yeah, well, great to have you here, and hope you get well soon, because it definitely is going around everywhere. Because I've had it. And did you have you?
I think I don't know. I feel
you were tough about it or something.
Yeah.
You
Thank you for that
off
vote
really
of
quick.
confidence.
I don't know.
I'm sure Rose is tough about it too.
I'm super tough. I'm super tough.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and read.
Great.
I'm not sure if it's an ode or an elegy, but anyway, I'm calling it an elegy for the traditional telephone kiosk. I guess over there you call it a booth. You were as British as a bowler hat, guzzling pennies and shillings like they were going out of fashion. House coats, pinstripes, Mary Quant, cloistered within your grubby glazing for all to see, scarlet TARDIS down the end of my street and your street, a totem by a village green, all lonely on a mountain pass where sheep rubbed daggy arses against your uncomplaining sides. You were there for us when we needed you, when our Morris miners broke down on rain-lashed nights, when we ran from home, closing doors behind us one last time, reversing charges when our pockets were full of holes. In your piss-tainted temples, we gossiped, flirted, promised, crossed our fingers and lied through teeth. Deals were hatched, births, marriages, deaths announced while life rolled by, oblivious outside. We thumbed your tattered directories as our cheeks shone wet in streetlight. Now everything we need is in our palms and our heads are bowed in service as we go through the day, wrapped in our own kiosk of interest. You have been ripped out, auctioned off as garden gazebo, or reimagined as village swap shop. And sometimes you're the closet we race to when a beating heart falters to shock it back to a steady 1-2. Even now the pulse of those we love can be saved by you. Even now you answer to our calls.
Oh, very cool.
So I should have explained before I started, I should have explained that some of these phone boxes now have defibrillators in them. So if somebody has a heart attack, you run to your phone box and use the defibrillator.
It's a great use, a news poem too.
Yeah,
great use of the phone booth and a great use of the prompt. And it was just fun from the top with that. The British, you were as British as a bowler hat.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that was great. So many great lines in that too. Yeah,
and it's interesting too as an American thinking about how we used to have call booths. They're just so boring looking, but you all lost something aesthetically as well, whereas they were ugly in America.
Yeah, and they're such an icon, aren't they? Our British phone boxes.
Yeah, I love them. I definitely have some goofy touristy pictures posing in them. So. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Rose.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. Glad you could be here. Yeah.
Thanks. Great to be on. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye. There's Rose Leonard, I think, with Elegy for the Traditional Telephone Kiosk. Let's go next to Bethany Jarmel, who is going to be the featured guest in 2 weeks with her new book. But here she is with the prompt poem. Hey, Bethany.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Good to see you. I'm definitely more awake for this one. Usually I'm like fighting off sleep to stay up, so I'm happy for the earlier time today.
That
Yeah.
makes sense with two small kids. I
Definitely
understand.
does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so mine is Elegy for the Appalachian Summers of My Childhood.
Oh.
For the smell of honeysuckle and the itch of poison ivy. For the sun-baked sweat stains on the armpits of our tank tops. For the bumpy toads that blinked at us as we clutched them, and the slimy ones that slipped from our fingers. For the July 4th festival with the local orchestra's star-spangled banner, violin bows bobbing like our father's fishing lines. For the sparse fireworks, our dandelions dissolving in the sky. For the cracked alley, whose potholes we filled with pebbles, and the house next door, whose peeling paint we couldn't help but pick. For the neighborhood cats that tangled around our ankles, and the barking of mutts and beagles that greeted us behind every fence. For when the world only stretched up as many hills as I could pedal on a 90-degree day. For the problems only as big as a bee sting or a sandbox left uncovered. For the sandcastle I formed before the storm.
Oh, that's great. Definitely brings me back to childhood too.
What wonderful details. And brings me back to Kentucky and summers there growing up. And I love the detail of the sparse fireworks. It kind of makes me long for, like, honestly, the fireworks shows here in the Woodlands, Texas are pretty impressive. I kind of want to see a lame one. Like, you know, like you're like, wow, you get to appreciate each individual firework more, I feel like, that way, because you know there aren't going to be many of them, right?
Yeah, so much of
you
life
just
is
don't
like
know
that.
you don't know it can be any other way when you're a kid. Wow, these are amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. And thanks for writing prompt poems. I love reading your submissions.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Bethany. It was Bethany Jarmel with Elegy for the Appalachian Summers of My Childhood. Next, let's go to Amanda Harris.
Hey guys.
Hey, Amanda.
Hi. So the poem I'm about to read you is a little difficult to write. It was about my first pet guinea pig whose name was Alex, and he just made my whole world brighten up. Elegy for Alex. In night you roamed my heart's spine as if looking for what the pet store did not give you. Admiration, jealousy, maybe innocence found you. More likely you found a state of being, parentheses, ear scratching, nose dribbling in flight, that our inner other could not give you.
Aw, yeah, really touching poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Amanda Harris with Elegy for Alex.
Oh, you could really picture the little.
I know, little guy. All right. Zachary Honeycutt is up next. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Katie. How's it going this afternoon?
Great.
Morning for you guys, right?
Still feels
Morning
like morning
still?
to me.
Technically, it's afternoon at this point. Yeah, it's
I'm
trouble.
behind on the coffee.
So don't kill me, Tim and Katie. I didn't mean to, but my poem goes one line over. I've been trying to be good, but it's one line.
Of course it does. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. All right. This is kind of abstract. I hope it works. An elegy lamenting the fictitious death of Porphyria. It felt like winter, even down there. On the printed page, death. Summertime and her blonde hair evaporate, become breath. This elegy laments the blondes, characters both come and gone, engraved into pop culture, shows, films, books, killed or kidnapped for their looks, enslaved by some strange creep, alien, gorilla, and this poetic dirge laments the urge the narrative still seems to suggest that blondes just can't take care of themselves. Not to discredit the charming redheads and brunettes that have taken an involuntary dive, sorry, Christiana and Hamat, off buildings, but before superheroes, Bond, Marilyn, Hitchcock, the gorilla falling alive, before Boy Crazy Clover, who totally carried the show from Totally Spies, there was poor Porphyria and her blonde hair, the snare that took away her air. If only she had ignored her lover's calls and kneed him in the balls.
All right. Well, the balls is. I was trying to look up the whole time you were reading what porphyria is, and I still don't understand.
We're gonna need to know.
We're gonna need a little explanation.
Yeah.
This one.
Porphyria is. I wrote a whole paper in college many moons ago on Porphyria's Lover, the famous Robert Browning poem. It's like a dark, romantic poem. It's like a hauntingly beautiful poem about this. Well, he's her lover, I guess, but basically the twist in the poem is that he strangles her to death with her own blonde hair. And the whole point of the poem was that he was trying to like encapsulate the moment of when she loved him the most, kind of like in a romantic gothic way. It's a really weird poem, but it's beautifully written. It's written in like tetrameter. And yeah, I studied it heavily in college because there's a lot of interpretations. Yeah.
Well, that's really
Did Browning also include someone being kneed in the balls, or was
they were
No, that was the plot twist. I was thinking to myself, there's so many blonde characters in literature and in film that are portrayed that way. So, since she's a blonde, why not write a poem where there's a twist where she takes care of herself and knees the character in the balls? I was rewriting Browning's poem. Yeah.
Yeah. I also accidentally strangle myself with my own hair often, so I can relate to that, I suppose.
Very relatable.
It's a good poem for you, Katie.
Yeah. Thanks, Zachary.
Thanks, Zach. That was fun. Yeah.
Always a pleasure. Great show. See you guys next week.
Yep.
See you.
Thanks. Take care. Zachary Honeycutt with an elegy lamenting the fictitious death of Porphyria. Let's go to Matt Joseph next.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Hi,
hey, Matt,
yeah.
Great. You were on
Great.
recently,
Hey,
right?
guys.
It's your second time on?
I was just on last Sunday. This is my second time.
That's right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
It
Yeah.
goes
Great to see you
without
again.
saying. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. This is kind of remarkable. So, I too tried the couplets of hexameter and pentameter, and I failed, but it was an attempt. So, there it is. So this is elegy for my 8-year-old summer. And this came about from a time at work where I was desperately looking how many likes I was getting on a comment I put in a chat, and I was feeling really sad about how anxious that was making me. So there we go. So elegy for my 8-year-old summer. I remember the stones by the creek, shining slick and bright and greenly mossed, and hungry swallows tracing twilight's bug-strewn canvas, picking too many too early blackberries, red, rock hard, and lemon sour, making our eyes squinch, our stomachs clench, our mouths go all a-pucker. We launched our bikes like bottle rockets off ramps made of plywood and crumbling brick. My chipped front tooth, a war medal proudly displayed to my mother's dismay. The hours were overflowing and thick with boredom and space and friends. The only screens in our lives, the blurry 3-channel rabbit-eared kind. The only web in our wide world, the sprawling dew-covered lattice we once woke to, home to a yellow-black spider as big as my fist. We use the word like to refer to things that we actually liked, not thumbs to be counted on some sad, sweaty abacus. We never doom-scrolled past a 15-year-old suicide bomber in Mosul just 10 minutes after his trembling thumb pressed the button. We didn't know the seas would one day rise to cover the beach where we dug, fast, but not fast enough to douse all the cities on fire. It's almost enough to carry this frayed leather pouch of marbles and memories, chipped cat's eyes, dented steelies, and pearlers and oilies. To know that I once ran so hard and so fast, I could not catch my breath. I can't catch it still, but I plan to keep chasing it on into death.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Another great poem with details from the nostalgia for the golden years. You know?
Yeah, it definitely also makes you want
I
to play
remember
marbles.
when.
Yeah, I do
Thanks
too.
so much, you guys.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really do want to learn marbles, just even for the terminology. Like those are the coolest words.
Well, we'll have to play marbles.
But I'm going to get too
marbles.
into it. Every game I play, I get too into it. I'm going to be carrying around marbles and challenging random
That's
people if we
true.
do.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we play it the right way. So I'm wondering. I kind of
sure
want
I
to look it up.
didn't. I just kind of
So what we did was you had a circle and then a pile of marbles. And then you had one marble and you like hit it into the pile and you get to keep whatever ones you get knocked out of the circle.
Okay.
That's how we played. I'm not sure if that's because other people were talking about it and I don't know if it's a different way. But anyway, that's how we did it back in the day. We could do it.
Yeah, I want to.
All right. Anyway, Linda Frith, a first-time caller, is up next. I think a first time.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi,
Linda,
can
great
you
to see
hear
you.
me?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Louisville, Kentucky.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I wrote this. I'm thinking a great deal. I turned 77 in March, and I'm very proud of that, by the way, because so many people don't get the honor. But I've been thinking a lot about our children's futures. So I wrote this, and I'm not completely finished with it. I want to work on it some, but I wanted to read it today. So thank you for letting me, if I can see it. Let me turn a light on. There. Okay. Elegy for our grandchildren's children's future. I am sorry for this mess I helped create, mostly by silence, but sometimes by curses, lies, looking the other way, the denial. How I made excuses for others, taught by my well-meaning grandma to overlook slights and to turn the other cheek, but also to lay down and take all that was proffered. But more than that, the lakes, the rivers, the oceans, how the coming generations will never know the luxury of an unpolluted stream, how they will never see an ivory-billed woodpecker pecking bark away in search of insects, never mind the California grizzly bear or other species obliterated by mankind. Mostly I mourn for air, sweet, clean, pungent with honeysuckle, and the scent of magnolias. Walking outside after dark without fear, these things our heirs will not experience. I am sorry for the bloody politic we've left you. Having fought so hard to win freedom, we have let it slip away. I knew the toughness of an Eisenhower, the fairness of Jimmy Carter, the stateliness of Reagan. If I could come back from the grave 100 years from now, I could only dare to hope that Generation Alpha stood up and said, enough. I could only hope that you and Earth are still here.
Yeah, great thought-felt poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Linda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Linda Frith with Elegy for our grandchildren's children's future. And yeah, thanks. Hope you come back again soon, Linda.
Oh, I will. Thank you. I really appreciate everything y'all are doing. I'm learning so much from you.
Oh, thanks, Linda.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, we appreciate that.
And I have a soft spot about the fact that you're from Kentucky. So I'm happy about that too.
Yeah, Katie's from Kentucky too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, Linda.
Thank you.
Next, let's go to Christiana Doucette.
There, did it unmute? It did.
I did. Hey, Christiana. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I tried 3 different times, Katie, not to write something that was political, and it just didn't work for me this time. So it is political, but it's just, that's what we're living right now,
You
feel
were meant
like.
to write it then. Yep.
For sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you know a couple of the references that I have in here. I love history, so this is an early elegy for American history, and I reference a couple different characters. There's Emma Lazarus, who wrote The New Colossus. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Hopefully everyone knows Susan B. Anthony, who fought for women's votes, Ruby Bridges, but I feel like people might be less familiar with Fred Korematsu. He was a Japanese American who fought all the way up to the Supreme Court to have the Japanese internment camps condemned. And each of the people that I just named, oh, and also I've referenced John Brown. They're all darker portions of American history where people were mistreated and persevered and saw change happen. And I wrote this because I love American history. I love all of it. And I've read the executive orders coming out about what they want to be taught in schools, a patriotic education that doesn't make America look bad. But the thing is, if we did bad things, I believe we should look at it and see the whole of it and see how we fought past it, because that's something beautiful. So this is an early elegy for American history. Before I start it, I did want to note one other spot. I reference delving too deep, and it's a Lord of the Rings reference to the dwarves who delved too deep, greedily trying to mine all of the mountain and release the Balrog, the fire. So an early elegy for American history. There's no defense against the dismissal of Black history, of Asian history, of women's history. Emma Lazarus is rolling in her tomb. I call her to come out into the gilded rooms wrapped in her grave clothes and point to Lady Liberty, to Susan B. Anthony, to Ruby Bridges, to Fred Korematsu and the loving family who carried her on their backs, aching to lay that burden down. Down, down, down they go. They lay it low. Can history be history if it is not whole? Oh, my soul, is this the judgment bowl cracking over our heads, the wine of wrath roiling down our roads, the goad of guilt spilt across our nation's states for the lies, the harbored hates, for how we've trampled neighbors, pushed for favors for ourselves at their expense? John Brown's moldering in the grave faces, the faces growling of unpatriotic schools, the rules somehow different for them. The fools rush in, trampling the careful angels of our better selves. They delve deep, too deep, deep enough to summon shadows and flame, to summon public shame as they whittle at the names written in blood with heavy toil. Does your blood not boil? But his soul goes marching on. No Khan can take it from us. And I did not see a Nazi greeted with such glee coming, but I'm thumbing through the history they're trying to delete. And the pattern is concrete, though as yet it's incomplete. Oh, history, your pages full of pain, of lies, of ties we've broken and treaties we've mistreated. You should not be repeated. You should not be distorted, but you should be reported. We need your stories. All of them. All of them.
Yeah, great poem, great reading of it. Very cool. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Christiana.
Thank you. As I was reading, I realized I didn't reference that there's a little bit of a twist on one of Abraham Lincoln's quotes, and that's where it talks about the better angels of ourselves. He used that in one of his early speeches.
Yeah, one of the great orators for sure. Abraham Lincoln. Thanks so much for sharing that, Christiana. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a Christiana Doucette with an early elegy for American history. Let's go to, I believe, another first-time caller. Wayne is here. Try to find the last name.
We tried to connect with Wayne, I think, last week
Oh,
or so,
that's right.
and then I
Hello.
don't think we were successful.
Can you
Now
hear
we are.
me?
Hi, Wayne. Yes.
Yeah. Hey,
Hello.
Wayne. How you doing?
Fantastic. This is a really a great thing. I only ran into you guys a couple of months ago, and I can't get away. I'm there every time now.
Oh,
So
great.
I'm really enjoying this. I guess that I'm kind of in the same boat with the political side of things, and this one is kind of direct, and it's called America 2025.
Okay.
This
pull it up right
apartment is small, 5 stories up, cluttered, adequate for my Social Security life over these last few years. There's always light through the window, the sun bouncing off block and neon. In the midnight alley below my window, I hear a trash can crash, someone crying, please. There are men laughing in light canvas shoes, beige shorts, and collared shirts. They circle around an idea, then attack. I scream down at them, stop it, someone do something. but brutality is underway. The rape of Lady Liberty, and I feel helpless.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that, Wayne, and being here. That was Wayne Williams with America
Thank
2025, an elegy for America. Yeah, thanks so much for
Thank you,
sharing that,
Wayne.
Wayne. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, Wayne Williams. I should ask, from Florida is where Wayne's from.
Oh, I would have delved deeper.
Florida, yes.
Yes, where in Florida, Wayne? I want to know.
Tampa Bay area.
Tampa Bay, great.
There
All
you
right,
go.
thanks.
All right. Yeah, well, thanks for being here, Wayne. Hope you come back
Thanks.
soon.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be back.
Great. Yeah, it was Wayne Williams once again with America 2025. Let's go next to Don Caskey, who also might be a first-time caller. Maybe he's been on once or twice before. Hey, Don.
Second time caller.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, yeah, good to see you.
I visited last week, but I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it's so funny because thinking back to Who Is New, it's hard to remember when they were, like
when
the
they
weeks
started coming, because
blend together.
Yeah, because it is like Wayne was just saying. A lot of people, when they find Rattle, I think it's a great boost for the community that people tend to get all into it, and not enter just lightly.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and then some are obviously old timers and old friends, but that's good too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mine was my captain. My old Akita St. Bernard captain stands beside me at the bedroom's sliding door. We watch the cold rain fall on the back porch. It reminds us both we need to pee. I'm in slow motion this morning, a groggy grump after my political party lost the election last night. I'll avoid my usual news podcasts and take a media sabbatical until next week, a grieving time. Things will be better by then. Captain dislikes these rainy winter days. The icy drops pierce his thick coat. The pads of his tender feet hate the cold puddles. He can't find the scents that tell him where to salute. He nudges my hand and I follow him to the living room at the other end of the house. He looks at the front door, then at me, and says, "It will not be raining out this door." "Oh, Captain," I say, "would that it were so."
Another summer elegy, my captain.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, it's
after
really
Walt
brilliant to do it after one of the most famous elegies of all time, too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks so much for
Thank
sharing
you.
that, Don. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was Don Caskey with my captain, Don from Lula, Georgia. Let's go next to Jacob Pearson.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, Jay, great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. So I'll keep this just a few sentences. The title of the poem is Prometheus Died in 1964. And basically a geologist went to some mountains in California and they took a coring tool to get into some trees to read their rings. And his tool got stuck and he got permission from the Forest Service to cut it down. And after cutting that tree down, they found out that that tree was the oldest known tree in the world.
Oh, wow.
And that happened back in 1964.
Oh,
and
that's
so,
rough.
yeah, so this is Prometheus died in 1964. So, no, not the Titan, but a Titan in its own right, which we hoped to witness before we heard the old news. First, the trunk groaned as the bark gasped like hospital doors. Then Prometheus fell, rings on display, which the geologist counted. 5,000 years, each ring thin as our whispers, proving this was the richest of all trees, despite the exposed driftwood bones scattered like broken ribs along the ground. All things we'd seen in pictures. This ring, the birth of Christ. This one, the Holocaust, and that one, a special one, the printing press. If Prometheus lived another century, then preserved in the ever-expanding rings would be our 7th anniversary, the weather during our convocation, and 1989 by Taylor Swift. Instead, the only memory is a cross-section in the visitor's center of the things we could have done when we were together.
Yeah, a sweet poem and
What a
yeah,
wonderful turn to the
too.
personal. Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. What kind of tree was Prometheus? Do you know? Was it a bristlecone pine?
You were asking the right person. It is a bristlecone pine, or Pinus aristata. And actually, the death of this tree was the catalyst to making Great Basin National Park.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's in Nevada or California. I should know, but I can't
Maybe the
remember.
creation of the park helped the person feel better about getting their tools stuck in this amazing tree. I would feel so, I can't even imagine, I would feel so bad. Like,
Oh, actually, it ended their career.
Oh.
And they felt so bad that they switched careers and they started studying the salt flats in Utah,
Wow. No
doing
trees.
chords as well. Yeah, and in a random interview, someone just asked them, "Hey, you know about this tree?" And instead of responding, they just turned around and ran from the camera.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
You can look it up.
Wow.
It's an unfortunate story with some comedic bits in it. But the new oldest tree, which actually was found to be older, the Forest Service, they don't disclose its location just to protect it because, people will vandalize it.
What if it was really the new oldest tree that was to blame? They just wanted the title.
Conspiring? Yeah, it's a conspiracy worth.
Yeah,
yes.
you always have to ask who benefits.
That's true. Cui bono. Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that. Really fascinating story. Yeah, thanks, Jacob.
I appreciate that.
Bye, guys. Gotta go.
Yep. That was Jacob Person with Prometheus Dead in 1964. All right. Let's see. Given who we've got left, let's go to Rod Deasy.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
Rod, great to see you.
Good. I was prompted to go back to the 60s when the thrust for peace and love was going, and thinking there was a fork in the road there which we missed.
Yeah, I'd say so.
This is an elegy for the spirit of 1969, and I follow the Tony Hoagland elegy rule, which is that in order to write an elegy, all you have to be is sad, which I am.
Yeah.
Okay, elegy for the spirit of 1969. Those were the magical stoner days, holy days of hope and wonder, peace and love. Our prophets gave us music, so much music, with words we knew were true. Life was joyful and all people were our brothers and sisters. Well, mostly. And we felt that we had turned a corner, crossed a border, past the point of no return, in a good way. Life would never be the same. Then, just 4 months before the decade's end, came Woodstock. Whoa, said the mainstream who'd ignored us. This is more interesting than we'd thought. By the time we got to Woodstock, the dream was almost done. Overnight, the underground went overground and gone. Oh, way uptown. Money, not music. Business, fat and mean. We found ourselves alive inside a marketing machine. We hid out in the country. We tried living off the land. It was a lot of work. Too much work. Plus, our string beans were way too stringy. Slugs ate our lettuces. Rabbits made jewelry from our snares. And we couldn't eat our chickens because they all had names. The only meat we could find was at Mickey D's. And brown rice? We don't talk about brown rice. Disillusioned and too paranoid to stay stoned, we sadly regressed, drinking wine and beer in numbingly large quantities, which led us to a new focus, how to get hold of large quantities of wine and beer. We cleaned up, cut our hair, shaved, dressed better, found jobs. If we had to work, might as well work smarter. earn more for less time spent. Then, in search of happiness, we bought stuff. Cars, houses, boats, diamonds, clothes, computers, smartphones, RVs, jet skis, Harleys, iPads, e-bikes, barbecues, flat screen TVs, and so on and so on. Still sad, we came to accept those dreaming days had disappeared forever into the lazy, hazy, free-loving, tie-dyed, patchouli oil past. Then, quick as a flash, we became our parents. We made all their dreams for us come true. Pensions and everything. How extremely depressing was that? It just goes to show we should never have gone to stupid fucking Woodstock.
Well, that's a great ending there, Rod. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's Rod DC with Elegy
Thanks.
for the Spirit of 1969. Let's go next to Mary Lisa D. Diminishes.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, Mary Lisa, great to see you.
Good to see everybody on this early Sunday. Let me get my poem up. Okay, so I mistitled it eulogy, but I changed it. I looked up the differences, and there were so many definitions of eulogy and elegy, and it seemed to me like it came down to one thing, which was one is prose and the other is a poem. So that was like the main difference between all the examples. All right, so this is my elegy for peace.
Okay.
Oh, I also sent a photo. I don't know if you got that. It's a Banksy.
I got that too. Do you want to see it right now or after?
Sure, if it would,
Okay, we'll
yeah.
look at it right
It
here.
inspired
This
the
is
poem along with the prompt. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the image. It's a Banksy. It's a little girl giving CPR to a dove. Very powerful graffiti from
Or perhaps
Banksy.
a pigeon. The most
Or a
beautifulest
pigeon.
bird in the
They
words
are the
of
most
Cherry.
beautiful. They are.
Good one, Katie. Great callback. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, elegy for peace. I suppose I never knew peace, really, now that I think about it hard. And that's okay, because there was so much to know, it would have been impossible. Also, I knew of peace. For instance, I saw Peace sit with a 6-year-old, staying up late and alone, waiting for her dad to come home, watching a cartoon on a hot summer night while eating a dish full of ice cream. Peace was down to earth like that. I also saw Peace the day my sick cat died, and his pain evaporated like a wretched ocean storm, replaced by a sea of calm. That same calm look washed over the terrified teenager's face the day her mom had a seizure in the thrift store, when finally the medics arrived and she got to ride along. That was Peace. Peace tried to keep up with us. I watched it, but we were so needy. It wasn't all about us. I know you know. And I think maybe we asked too much of Peace. Did we ask too much? Did our constant warring ways wear out its heart? Did we suck its soul slowly with our moping? Did we mess with its chakras? Vampires. I was one too. I can't deny I was a beneficiary of Peace's interactions. How else would I have ever tasted the sweet, slight tart of an orange if there hadn't been peace between people who were strangers to me? Peace between the land and the climate and the trees. I don't know what will happen without it. Peace was multifaceted. We'll have to send condolences to love. In our sorrow, let's not forget all Peace stood for. Let's not forget to offer our support and pray for the rest of the world.
Yeah, thanks. Great poem to have an elegy for.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that.
And personifying
Lisa.
peace is definitely interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys. And thank you for the opportunity and for bringing us all together here to share.
Thanks,
for being here.
It means a lot, not just to me. I can see, like, it means a lot to everybody. So
Aw.
thank you.
Thanks, Mary Lisa.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with Elegy for Peace. A couple more poets left on the line. Let's see. Steve Horrell is here.
Did that work? I
Hey,
unmuted.
Steve. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. This has been a great, as per usual. I don't read that often, but I'm always listening to these.
Oh, great.
I have two quick comments to make. This is called Elegy on my 78th birthday, which is today.
Oh, happy birthday. Yeah.
Yes, and also a little self-promotion, if I may. I've always been reluctant to self-publish. I think we need editors. But having failed to win any chapbook prizes anywhere, I decided to self-publish this book, which is to my wife.
Oh, that's really touching. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it. I can't tell. At any rate, it's she died. She passed away 3 years ago,
I'm sorry to
and I
hear
just
that.
couldn't wait any longer. So I've self-published this. It's
Well,
called
we're
Your
huge
Absence,
supporters of
Sadness,
self-publishing. I have to say that's great. Good for you.
Yeah, we definitely
Yeah, we
are. And
definitely.
for the most part, I
it
mean,
makes more sense for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which is why at the bottom of my poem, I also see it's on here too. If anybody wants a copy of this, they can just send me an email, and we can make some arrangement, and I'll mail it to you. $10.
Yeah, definitely.
That includes shipping and fondling or handling, however. Okay, so now I'm going to read the elegy to my 78th year. I think I forget what I titled it now.
I
You
should say,
have it?
just for those just listening, that's St. Horrell, HOREL at telus.net. That's the email address. Okay, yeah, go ahead. It's an elegy on my 78th birthday is what we have.
Right. Youth, where were you when I was there? How did we miss each other? Did I not value you enough? I always desired you, more so it seems now you're gone. You threw yourself out of trees just to feel one moment of flight. You wrote poems that way too. How did I get here without you? Just by waking, less of you each morning.
They're a very touching poem and touching story with the chapbook. Thanks so much for sharing that on your birthday.
Thanks, and happy birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, have a great rest of your birthday.
Now I'm back to YouTube because I love reading them.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yep.
Bye.
Yeah, Steve Horrell, elegy on my 78th birthday. Let's go to Mike Bales next.
Got a big group today.
Yeah, we definitely do. It's always, coming in the morning, one of the reasons why we do it at night is because people get tired and there's like an automatic cap on the length of the show. I think if we did it every Sunday, we might end up being like 8 hours a day if we did it in the mornings. Yeah. So anyway, what do you got for us this week, Mike?
Well, one thing that loomed as about as big in my life as my travels as a flagger was the summers I spent on a summer cottage in Minnesota, my parents. So my elegy is, it's submittable, is Summer Cottage. A fair summer wind blew in June around a small house nestled in a pastoral land near Horseshoe Lake. My mother sat on the dock and fished, and the Dalmatian went for a swim while my father toiled back in town. Placid waters reflected tall grasses on the other side, and blessed with solitude, I savored every moment. In my youth, I gazed at clouds as they drifted through an eternal sky, as if the season would never end. Yet priests in grade school talked about the gates of Eden, a place we called home until we learned our fate, and the price we'd pay when cities overtook the land, and ones we loved would die. Now in town and bearing my age on a winter day, I look at a patch of bare trees at the end of the street.
Yeah, great. And on that image there, Mike, thanks so much for sharing that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's Mike Bales with Summer Cottage, another throwback poem.
Mhm.
Brings back the old days for me, too.
Mhm.
Let's go to Megan McDonald next. Gotta have you unmute, Megan. Are you there? There you go.
Sorry.
Hey,
Yeah.
no
Hey.
problem. Great to see you.
Okay, so a short one, an elegy for libraries.
Ah.
I started it as a major in library science, and boy, has it changed.
Oh, I bet. Jeez, yeah.
An elegy for libraries. The books and libraries are disintegrating to crumpled words of decaying pages. Bibliotech. There are libraries without print books to hold, to cherish. Maybe I'm old, not in tune with audio, ebooks, or whatever comes next. How do you collect online words? How do you browse online? There is no tactile feel, only a swipe up, down, left, right. There is no smell of new books or the scent of age in used bookstores. Print is out of date. We are losing the magic of ink.
Yeah, we definitely are, and it's heartbreaking. I love all that tactile experience of reading books and being in a library and just exploring and not knowing what you're going to find.
Yeah, and the library binding is so beautiful too. I love buying used books on thrift books, and I always pay more for the library binding if there's an option.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Megan. Yeah, great thing to have an elegy for sure. It was Megan McDonald with an elegy for libraries. Let's go to another. I think it's only a few times about a relatively new poet. Zeev Smolensky is here.
Hello, guys.
Hey, Zeev, great to see you. Thanks for coming back.
I'm thrilled to be here. This is an elegy for two bowls.
Yeah, that's cool.
This in that, or that in this. Light lilac one, mustard yellow the other. Silent on the shelf aft, no longer new. A chip here, a nick there. Tomorrow morning, one could be recruited for fruit wedges with yogurt. Or by evening, her sister, hot soup by the TV. One day they'll disappear. The purple one will break, or the mustardy will get lost. Please, God, let that be long after I'm gone.
Oh, yeah, very touching poem. Two bowls.
really
Yeah,
is.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that, Zeev.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was Zeev Smolensky with two bowls. Yeah.
I love the appreciation for common everyday items.
Yeah. Let's see. Steve Croft is next.
Hey, Tim and Katie.
Hi.
Hey, Stephen. Great to see you.
Thank you. I wanted to write about an inanimate object. It would be easy to write about a pet, but so I found my topic in this book, Atlas Obscura. which
Yeah, that's a
is
great book and
also-
website too. A
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah,
you know,
interesting
yeah,
website.
mhm.
So there's a train graveyard in Bolivia, and
Oh wow, that's a cool photograph. Yeah.
Yeah. So this has a Neil Young connection in a way for why I chose it. Neil Young has an elegy song called "Long May You Run," which I knew was played at funerals, and I thought was really touching. So I found out later it's about a car he had, and so looking through Atlas Obscura, I found the train graveyard, and that kind of clicked. Okay, so that's what I want to write about. I did a little bit of research into the Bolivian rail history because I was wondering why the trains are there.
Yeah.
The tourist things just say they're there. Go see them. There was something called the Pacific War in around 1900, maybe a little few years earlier, where Chile declared war against Peru and Bolivia lost its rail line to the Pacific coast. The trains that carried all the minerals from their rich mines stopped, and the trains kind of accumulated in this mining depot. So this is Elegy for the Ghost Trains, Uyuni, Bolivia. Desert cry of train whistles, a distant memory where time's a wave of dry wind across a salt pan flat, particles of sand clothing giant driving wheeled cylinders, empty fireboxes awaiting the shovels in yesterday's hands, broken glass board-on gauges stuck in synchroscope loop of boiler pressure zeros, like Zen masters, locomotives powering Bolivia's economy to a new industrial age, stopped, rested on their tracks, as if hearing, energy can never move faster than light. They squat in an acetylate entropy of rust under the daily victorious sun, as if knowing on their now broken tracks, they still move with the eternal earth, spinning forever into the future, 1,000 miles per hour.
Oh, that's great. I love where you went with that. They're still spinning. I love that phrase too, acetylate entropy of rust.
Right. So, I found acetylate because I was thinking acolyte. So I found the word. Jimmy Buffett talked about writing songs and how most songs had $1 words, but every now and then you need a $10 word. So this was my $10 word in the poem acetylate.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen. That was great. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool history too. And yeah, you should check out that website. It's Atlas Obscura. I used to follow him on Facebook before things stopped showing up on Facebook and it no longer became interesting.
That sounds great.
It's like a photograph book of weird places in the world.
I also want to go through Jimmy Buffett's songs and listen for $10 words. I'm interested.
Yeah, I wonder what the other ones are. Yeah, very cool. All right, well, that's going to wrap up the Zoom. Let's see. We got one from Ted Guevara too. Let's do that quickly. We got a photo of, it looks like James Dean, but I'm not Katie confirms
I
some
think
James Dean.
I can't tell if it's just a doppelganger James Dean or if it's actually James. I think I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
it looks like James Dean, but it also looks a little earlier than I would think. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. So there's a photo of possible James Dean, and here is Ted's poem. The camera is to be grieved with tears. Oh, wait, so Dust to the Lens. Dust to Lens is the title, sorry. The camera is to be grieved with tears. It did not crash in a convertible, but it framed an unfinished cause mired over the years. If it could, it would extend life and let youth continue its wild, misunderstood ways. But that's only the click. Girls with red handkerchiefs around their necks prefer a deep well where they can forever keep their lonesome nights, dedicated to him. Other boys would rev and combust, but the girls only heard their superficial noise. The camera breathed silently in the truth of the face it once knew. Days in overalls lying in the slits amidst corn stalks. This was the simple life it grappled, molded, and threw into the limelight. The camera visored such brightness, its only eye stayed open after the enigmatic flash. How fast does a lens flicker, grow tender ducts at its shutter, and release a fleeting soul? So esteemed death swerves nowhere, so loosened it refuses to park. You like that last line too?
Yeah.
That was Dust to Lens again with a James Dean photo. Thanks for sharing that,
It was
Ted.
James Dean that became apparent.
Yeah, it definitely did. Or maybe an AI. You never know these days.
That's true.
But anyway, thanks for sharing that, Ted. Always a pleasure. And it's time for the Sciku. And the Sciku this week is based on the following story. Let me find it. Here it is. So this is a story from India, published in the Aarhus University. That might be an acronym, I'm not sure. But this is the story. Tigers in the Neighborhood, how India makes room for both tigers and people. So in India, tigers haven't just survived, they're making a comeback. Despite a growing population and increasing pressure on their habitats, the number of wild tigers has doubled in just over a decade.
William Blake would be happy.
There you go. The reason is a combination of ecological restoration, economic incentives, and political stability. And just as importantly, a deep-rooted reverence for tigers that has fostered a culture where humans and predators can coexist. And that's just one of the interesting things that we tend not to think of as we talk about the way the environment goes, is that the number one thing you can do to reduce pollution and the destruction of the environment is actually lifting people out of poverty. Prosperity is what allows people to actually care about the environment and have the resources to help with the environment. And one of the main things that helped here in India to double the tiger population is that if a tiger takes an animal from a farmer, the government will pay for the animal, and so if you don't kill the tiger. And so that disincentivizes like people being worried about tigers killing their livestock, which means that farmers don't kill but you need a nice political system and some prosperity for that. That's just one example of the way prosperity is really the key to protecting the environment, actually. So interesting story there out of India, and that's a lot of tigers. I'm glad they're not in Texas or California. Sure. I don't want to bring the grizzly back to California either. Anyway, so the Sciku based on that is the following. Tiger stripes, the there and not there of attention.
Oh, that's really nice.
Thank you. Tiger stripes, the there and not there of attention. That is your Sciku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Now, next week's prompt is going to be what, Katie Dozier?
We are going to write a poem that includes a memory you've never spoken of before. Include dialogue.
So why did you choose this as the prompt?
I thought that it would be fun to really explore memory, and it's going to be super challenging for me because I talk about everything that ever happened in my life, so I'm looking forward to personally having that challenge. And then we were talking recently, Tim, about how difficult dialogue is to write. At least for me, I really struggle with it, so I think maybe being forced to talk in a poem about something we haven't talked about before would be an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. One of the things, I don't know if, because you listened to it, Lou Watts was talking about how with his great Hyben, that dialogue that he wrote screenplay is actually one of the most useful things for him to write Hyben, because he puts dialogue in them a lot, if you notice.
Right, that's probably in the back of my brain.
Yeah, maybe. Yep. So that's going to be fun. So write a poem that includes memory you've never spoken of before and include dialogue. So very cool. That's going to be a fun prompt. And next week's guest is going to be...
Also, just before you do that, I just want to mention the Poetry Space episode that is out, where we talk about poetry workshops, including a deeper dive into your poetry workshop, the Critique of the Week, that's every Friday live, and then poetry workshops in general.
Yeah, with Adrian Christian as a guest, a wonderful workshop leader from Pacific University, talking about ways to make the most of poetry workshops or the Critique of the Week, or any writers group that you have around. Yeah. So a really useful episode, I think. And you can find that anywhere you find... podcasts.
Yeah.
So like iTunes, Spotify, Audible, whatever. So just look up the Poetry Space and it'll come up if you search that. Well, anyway, thanks for doing that, Katie, and thanks for doing the prompt lines as always. It's a pleasure having you here. And now, next week's guest is going to be Todd Robinson. And so Todd Robinson's a Nebraska poet, also known as the Todd Father. So anybody who calls himself the Todd Father seems like a really fun guy.
I want to call myself that, but I feel like I'd have less credibility.
Yeah, that's his website, toddfather.net. So I love that. Awesome. He's also friends with Eric Campbell, which is a good choice of friendship. His most recent book is Mass for Shut-ins, which sounds fun too. So a lot of potential for enjoyment in this episode. That's Rattlecast number 281. The guest, Todd Robinson, next Sunday, February 16th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good day.
Goodbye.